Hi everyone, and welcome to our module on insulin. In this module we're going to talk about using insulin for treatment of diabetes, but first let me mention some of the differences in the ways we treat type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, as you know, is a result of autoimmune destruction of beta cells in the pancreas. So children who are type 1 diabetics have no insulin production. Therefore, the mainstay of treating type 1 diabetes is with insulin. These children require lifelong insulin. Type 2 diabetics, on the other hand, have some beta cell function, so initially they don't necessarily have to be treated with insulin. There are oral and subcutaneous drugs, which we'll talk about in another module, and these are usually used in the initial stages shortly after diagnosis. Once the diabetes becomes advanced, then these patients often require insulin as well. There are many different types of insulin that are available for the treatment of diabetes. Almost all of them are administered as a subcutaneous injection by the patient at home. So as we will see, some of them are absorbed from the subcutaneous tissue very rapidly, and therefore they quickly exert their effect and then wash out of the body. Others are absorbed very slowly, and therefore they can exert their effects over long periods of time, potentially even over an entire day. So all the different types of insulin vary by their time to peak effect and their duration of action. They also vary by how high their peak effect is. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the shortest acting insulins, the ones that have a fast peak and a short duration, are called rapid acting insulins. Regular insulin also has a very fast peak and a short duration of action. NPH insulin is somewhere in the middle. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, detamir and glargine have the slowest peak and the longest duration of action. These two drugs provide insulin coverage over a period of almost 24 hours. So we'll start by talking about the rapid-acting insulins. And in order to understand these drugs, you need to understand that insulin likes to form hexamers in the body. These are 6 insulin molecules linked together, and it's a very stable structure. This is a picture of an insulin hexamer shown on the screen here. As I told you before, insulin is usually administered subcutaneously, and the activity relates to the speed of absorption. So insulin that is in the form of hexamers has a slower onset of action. On the other hand, insulin that is in the form of monomers is absorbed much more quickly and has a faster onset of action. So the rapid-acting insulins are Lispro, Aspart, and Glulisine. They are all modified human insulins, and they contain insulin molecules with modified amino acids, and because of the altered amino acid structure, they have a reduced tendency to form hexamers and polymers. This leads to more rapid absorption, a faster onset of action, and a shorter duration of action. So the onset of action for these drugs is about 15 minutes, the peak effect occurs in about an hour, and the duration of action is about 2 to 4 hours. This makes them the perfect drugs for pre-meal insulin. Many diabetics experience hyperglycemia after they eat a meal. If they take a dose of one of these drugs before eating, they will have less post-meal hyperglycemia, so these are therefore called prandial insulins because they are given with meals. This is a graph showing the activity of the rapid-acting insulins. You can see that their peak effect here occurs within about an hour, and by about 2 to 4 hours, their effect is completely gone. The next type of insulin is called regular insulin. This is a synthetic analog of human insulin. It's human insulin made by recombinant DNA techniques. There are bacteria in the laboratory that have been genetically modified so that they produce large quantities of regular human insulin. When it's injected subcutaneously, its onset of action is about 30 minutes, the peak is about 2 to 3 hours, and the duration is about 3 to 6 hours. And here's our same graph again, and now I've added regular insulin to show you how it compares to the rapid-acting insulins. You can see that its time to peak effect is a little bit longer, and its duration of action is also a little bit longer. It also has a slightly lower peak than the rapid-acting insulins. Regular insulin is commonly used among hospitalized patients. Blood sugar elevations are common among diabetics who are in the hospital with infections or who have undergone surgery. You will often prescribe what's called a regular insulin sliding scale. This is a sliding scale or escalating dose that is given by the nurse based on how high the fingerstick blood sugar is at the bedside. Regular insulin is also the only type of insulin that is given IV. You need to give IV insulin to treat serious complications of diabetes like DKA and HHS. I talk about both of these in another module, but they are dangerous and potentially life-threatening, and IV regular insulin is the therapy of choice. You can also use IV regular insulin to treat hyperkalemia. Insulin will drive potassium into cells, so you can give insulin IV together with glucose to prevent the patient from becoming hypoglycemic. You may wonder why regular insulin is given IV instead of the rapid-acting insulins, and that's because regular insulin and rapid-acting insulins have the same onset of activity when administered IV. The rapid-acting insulins are only faster when administered subcutaneously. Because regular insulin has been around much longer and is less expensive, it is the treatment of choice when you need an IV therapy. The next type of insulin is called NPH insulin. NPH stands for neutral protamine Hagedorn. This is regular insulin combined with neutral protamine. That's how it gets its name. By combining regular insulin with neutral protamine, this slows absorption and gives it a peak onset of about 4 to 8 hours and a duration of onset of about 12 to 16 hours. This graph depicts the activity of NPH compared to regular and rapid. You can see that its onset of action is slower and its duration of action is much longer. The mainstay of insulin therapy used to be NPH once or twice a day with regular insulin at meal times. However, this has changed in the last few years because now the rapid-acting insulins are available. And in addition, instead of NPH, we now have two very long-acting insulins, glargine and detamir, which we'll talk about next. Glargine is insulin with a modified amino acid structure. It's soluble in a liquid acidic solution for dosing, but once the patient injects it into the subcutaneous tissue, it precipitates at the body's pH and forms crystals. This allows the insulin molecules to slowly dissolve away from the crystals, and as a result, glargine has a low continuous level of activity. The onset is in about 1 to 1.5 hours, and the duration is up to 24 hours, so this can be injected once daily. You can see on this slide that glargine has a very long duration of action compared to the other types of insulin. Glargine is what's known as a basal insulin. Diabetics can take this once a day, and then they can take a bolus of regular or rapid-acting insulin at meal times or other times when they need extra insulin in their body. The final type of insulin is called detamir. This is insulin with a fatty acid side chain added onto it, which slows the rate of absorption. It will aggregate in the subcutaneous tissue and be absorbed slowly. In addition, detamir binds reversibly to albumin, so this also gives it a longer duration of action. The onset is in about 1 to 2 hours. The duration is greater than 12 hours. It's usually given once or twice daily. Its claim to fame is that it is believed to cause less weight gain, so it's often marketed as a long-acting insulin that will cause less weight gain than glargine. Now I've shown in this slide all 5 types of insulin. You can see that detamir and glargine have the longest duration of action, rapid-acting and regular have the shortest, and NPH is an intermediate insulin. Detamir and glargine are often given once daily with regular or rapid insulin on top at mealtimes. NPH used to be used a lot, but now it's been replaced in many cases by detamir and glargine. So just to summarize, the rapid-acting insulins are often given pre-meal. They're sometimes referred to as prandial insulins. Regular insulin is given as a sliding scale in the hospital. It's also the IV drug of choice for treatment of diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperkalemia. NPH, glargine, and detamir are often given as background or so-called basal therapy to supply a long-acting level of insulin to the body with boluses of rapid-acting or regular on top of that. Just a quick bit of vocabulary here. You will sometimes hear the term insulin analogs. Insulin analogs are insulin therapies that do not contain human insulin molecules. They have a modified insulin structure. So the rapid-acting insulins, detamir and glargine, are all considered insulin analogs. On the other hand, regular insulin and NPH are not considered insulin analogs. They do contain human insulin molecules. Regular insulin, as I said before, has insulin molecules made by recombinant techniques. An NPH insulin contains regular insulin molecules added to neutral protamine to slow absorption, but it still contains regular insulin, and therefore it's not an insulin analog. The major side effect of all insulin regimens is hypoglycemia. Patients can develop tremor, palpitations, sweating, or anxiety. These are all signs of low blood sugar, and when diabetics develop these symptoms, they become familiar with how to react, and they will often drink some orange juice or eat a cookie or a cracker. If the hypoglycemia is severe, it can lead to seizure or a coma, and this leads me to one of my most important points, which is you always need to check the blood sugar in an unconscious patient. It may be due to hypoglycemia, and that is easily reversible if you identify it as the cause. In clinical practice, you often adjust the dosages and frequency of insulin in order to avoid low glucose and also maintain the lowest possible hemoglobin A1C value. Another thing you should be aware of is that weight gain is the major side effect of insulin. It occurs in most patients who are taking insulin, and that's because insulin promotes fatty acid and protein synthesis, and patients who are diabetic are often overweight to begin with, and when they are placed on insulin, they can increase their weight even further. And that concludes our module on insulin therapy.